Good evening, poetry lovers everywhere. Did you know today is National Poetry Day? So I hope you've read a poem, or better still, written one. Anyway, for my Turkish friends, merhaba Turkey, umarım her şey yolundadır. Well, one or two of you have asked about the pictures on the wall behind, and one in particular I'd like to show you. That is my grandma and grandpa. That's my mum's mum, and that's her husband, obviously. I didn't know him, Joe. He was called Joe, and she was called Clara. And she was born in 1874, and she looks to be about 30 there, I should say. So this picture is 120 years old. And it's an original picture. It's not a print, it's a picture. Incredible, isn't it? That's my Nana, I used to call her. That's the only grandparent I knew. But she was a lovely old lady. And I mentioned her last week, I think. Anyway, there we are. Also, the picture on the wall up there, somebody wanted to look at, so here it is. That's a pencil drawing by a friend of mine. And I think it's incredibly good. And especially when you think that she's crippled with arthritis. She can hardly hold a pencil and she can produce a picture like that. I could never do that. Amazing. You might know who it is. Famous. I'll give you a clue. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Well, you might not get it from the impression, but you should get it from the picture. That's Leonard Cohen. And the song was called Hallelujah. However, I'll stick that back on the wall. Well, I've had a question as well as to how old I am from one of my younger subscribers. Well, I'll give you a clue. I was born in 1942, so work it out. And how long have I been writing poems and poetry? Well, I've always sort of been able to write limericks and silly little verses, but I started when my eldest granddaughter was born, really. Started writing them down anyway. I went to see her when she was about 7 hours old, and she was awake, and we looked into each other's eyes, and I knew then that there was some special bond and that she was something special. And I used to write little poems for her. She was born on December the 21st, 2004. And I used to write a poem illustrating her year's activities with pictures as a little Christmas gift. And that lasted until 2009. Because in 2010, in September, I lost my dear wife, I'm afraid. She lost her battle against cancer, and I became a widow. Widower. Widower. Well, it sort of knocked me sideways and I lost all enthusiasm for anything light-hearted, and I stopped writing poetry. I just couldn't do it. Well, my granddaughter was only 5 at the time, and she seemed to sense my sadness, and I spent a lot of time with her as her parents were working, and we talked and we played games, and eventually we started writing silly little poems again. Let me give you 2 examples. There were 2 little worms sitting in a hole. One poked its head out and got eaten by a mole. The other worm thought that was quite absurd, so he popped his head out and got eaten by a bird. Stupid, but... And she wrote this one. My grandpa is a handsome man whose beard is snowy white. He washes it with special soap, which makes it glow at night. I told you they were silly poems, but they helped me to regain my sense of fun, and I started writing poetry again. Well, true to form, that 5-year-old granddaughter is now 18 and has just started on a classics degree at Cambridge University. I knew she was something special. Well, grief affects people in many different ways. And the way it affected me it was like a dark cloud descending upon me. Total and utter sadness. And all I could do was sit and let it wash over me, cry my eyes out for 20 minutes, and if it hadn't finished in 20 minutes, I made it finish. Because I think you've got to control it. It's essential to let it out, but you've got to control it and not let it control you. But what did help me was poetry. I wrote several intensely personal poems at the time about my wife and our life together, which I may share with you one day. But 2 poems in particular helped me, and I'd like to read them to you tonight. One is by Christina Rossetti, and she was a Victorian English poet, and she wrote a poem which a lot of you would probably have heard. It's known as the funeral poem, I'm afraid, and very often read out at funerals. But I'm going to read it to you because it illustrates my kind of poetry. It's a simple poem, it's easy to read, easy to understand, and it has a powerful message. And it's called Miss Me But Let Me Go. When I come to the end of the road and the sun has set for me, I want no rights in a gloom-filled room. Why cry for a soul set free? Miss me a little, but not for long, and not with your head bowed low. Remember the love that once we shared. Miss me, but let me go. For this is a journey we all must take, and each must go alone. It's all part of the master plan, a step on the road to home. When you are lonely and sick at heart, go to the friends we knew. Laugh at the things we used to do. Miss me, but let me go. I like that, and that helped me. And so did this. This isn't a poem in the strict sense of the word, it's a piece of poetic prose. I read it in a book several years ago, and I can't remember the title of the book or the name of the author. It's an age thing, I'm afraid. But although I can't remember it word for word, it went something like this. My love for you is both timeless and deathless. If you cannot return but can hear my thoughts, then you will know how much I still love you. But if you can come back and move unseen amongst us, then I shall always be near you. If there be a soft breeze upon my cheek, it shall be your breath. Or if the cool air fans my troubled brow, it shall be your spirit passing by. I wish I'd written that. Well, powerful stuff, poetry. The pen is mightier than the sword. And it helped me in my time of grief, and maybe it will help others too. We're all going to experience grief. It's inevitable. In any life you will experience grief. And I think it's necessary to experience the bad times in order to fully appreciate the good times that you're going to have. But one thing I did learn in my time of grief was that it's easy to imagine that you are the centre of attention, that only you are grieving. But when my wife died, my children lost a mum. My grandchildren lost a grandparent. My brother-in-law lost a sister, and all her friends lost a good friend. So it's essential to remember that other people are grieving just as much as you are too. Well, over time, of course, the pain of grief loses its intensity. And although I shall never forget her, I choose to remember the good times that we had together, and there were plenty of those. Well, I'm sorry if this has been a little heavy this week, so let's finish on a slightly lighter note with this little poem. To forgive and forget is a maxim of old, but I only know half of it yet. The theft of my heart I can freely forgive, but the thief I can never forget. I'll leave you with that thought. See you next week. Bye-bye.